What would you do if the person you loved the most, the one you sacrificed everything for, betrayed you in the worst possible way? This is the story of a young woman who supported her boyfriend for years, only to discover the truth in the most painful way imaginable, when she found him in bed with her best friend. As we uncover this shocking betrayal, you'll see how every choice led to a dramatic shift, one that none of them could have predicted. We've all been there, haven't we? Giving so much of ourselves to someone we trust, only to find out it was all a lie. You may be thinking, what do I have to lose if I give it my all? But sometimes, those decisions come back in the most painful ways. In this video, you'll not only witness the heartbreak of betrayal, but also discover the emotional complexities behind love, trust, and the consequences of blind loyalty. Have you ever trusted someone completely, giving them everything you had, only to find out they were hiding something far darker than you could have imagined? Stay with me as we break down the twists and turns of a story filled with betrayal, love, and an ending that will leave you speechless.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel.
From the bustling streets of New York City, Jessica had always been a woman of ambition and discipline. Growing up in a well-established family, she excelled in school, driven by the desire to make something of herself. With her sharp mind and fierce determination, she was constantly striving toward her goals, one of them being to study law at one of the best universities in the country. Jessica's future was bright, and everyone around her knew that success was only a matter of time. As a teenager, she was more focused on her studies than on relationships, spending countless hours in the library, absorbing everything she could. Her friends often joked that she was a bookworm, and though she didn't mind the label, she did wonder if maybe, just maybe, she was missing out on what everyone else was doing. When she graduated from high school, Jessica had a plan. She knew she would succeed no matter what. She wasn't going to settle for less than the best. In 2012, she made the decision to move to Los Angeles to live with her aunt, who was an entrepreneurial powerhouse running a successful digital marketing agency. With the opportunity to study at Harvard University, Jessica felt like she had everything she needed to succeed. She was confident, independent, and ready to take on the world. Enter Alex, a part-time employee at her aunt's agency. At first glance, Alex seemed to be the perfect man, charming, intelligent, and ambitious in his own right. He was a second-year student at a local university, balancing his academics with a part-time job that gave him a sense of independence. To Jessica, Alex represented everything she admired: ambition, confidence, and a carefree attitude that contrasted with her own strict academic discipline. Their first meeting wasn't anything extraordinary, but as they spent more time together, Jessica found herself captivated by Alex's effortless charm. He listened when she spoke, made her laugh when she needed it most, and his easygoing nature made her feel comfortable in a way no one ever had before. To her, Alex seemed to have it all together. He had dreams, he was studying hard, and his genuine interest in her made her feel like she was finally seen for the person she truly was. Over the next several weeks, their relationship blossomed. What started as casual conversations at the agency quickly evolved into late-night chats, endless laughter, and shared moments that felt more like destiny than coincidence. For Jessica, it was love at first sight. Alex seemed perfect, and for the first time, she felt like she had found someone who understood her. Enter Tina, Jessica's closest friend and confidant, a bond forged over years of shared experiences. Tina was a fellow student at Harvard, and though she wasn't as academically inclined as Jessica, she had an infectious personality that drew people in. She and Jessica became inseparable during their first year, sharing everything from notes to secrets, with Tina always playing the role of Jessica's emotional anchor. Tina was there for every milestone, whether it was celebrating the good grades or comforting each other through personal setbacks. But despite their closeness, there was always something about Tina that Jessica could never quite put her finger on, something subtle but noticeable. While Jessica was busy building a future, Tina seemed more interested in enjoying the present, often encouraging Jessica to loosen up and have fun. What Jessica didn't know at the time was that Tina harbored feelings for Alex. Though Tina never openly expressed her feelings, there was always a sense of longing in her eyes whenever Alex was mentioned. She brushed it off as harmless, not realizing that Tina's affection would soon evolve into something far more dangerous than simple attraction. As their relationship grew, Jessica found herself not just as Alex's girlfriend but as his caretaker, his financial supporter, and his emotional anchor. She gave him everything: money to help him with school, emotional support during stressful times, and a steady presence in his life. She believed in him so deeply that she didn't hesitate to make sacrifices to ensure he was happy and successful. Her devotion to him was unmatched, and she convinced herself that it was worth it, that their love would be the foundation of a future together. Despite their growing bond, there were signs that Jessica's love for Alex was one-sided. She was always the one making sacrifices, financially and emotionally, while Alex, despite his charm, seemed to do very little to reciprocate. But Jessica didn't mind. She was in love, and as any devoted partner would, she continued to give him everything, convinced that someday he would appreciate her efforts. But behind the seemingly perfect relationship, something began to shift. Alex became more distant, and Jessica's efforts to keep the relationship moving forward became more desperate. There were small signs: his growing reliance on her for money, his late-night outings without explanation, his reluctance to commit to anything serious beyond their casual dating. Despite these signs, Jessica ignored them, telling herself that love would conquer all. She couldn't have been more wrong. It started innocently enough: two young people in love, building a future together. But behind closed doors, something darker was brewing. Jessica never saw the betrayal coming.
At the beginning, Jessica felt like she had found everything she ever wanted in a relationship. Alex was charming, attentive, and seemed to share her dreams for the future. For the first time, she felt deeply loved and appreciated by someone. He listened to her, supported her, and made her feel special. He was everything she had imagined in a partner. They were both ambitious and driven, and Jessica believed that together they could achieve anything. But as time went on, the dynamic between them began to shift. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Alex started leaning more heavily on Jessica for emotional and financial support. What began as small favors, helping him with his studies or occasionally covering his expenses, soon grew into a much larger burden. Alex's need for her assistance seemed endless. It wasn't just about paying his bills anymore. It was about being there for him every time he faced a challenge, no matter how small. At first, Jessica didn't mind. She was in love and believed that this was what a relationship was about, supporting each other through thick and thin. However, as the months passed, she started to realize that the sacrifices she was making were becoming more one-sided. Her emotional well-being began to take a back seat to Alex's needs. While Jessica was studying hard to maintain her academic performance, Alex had started to quit his part-time jobs, relying entirely on her financial support. His excuses were always the same: "I'm too stressed with school," or "I'm focusing on my future." But what Jessica didn't realize was that Alex wasn't as focused on his future as he appeared. Instead of taking responsibility for his life, he was using Jessica's love and generosity as a crutch. The more he leaned on her, the more she found herself sacrificing her own happiness to fulfill his desires. The more she gave, the more Alex seemed to expect. And the more he expected, the less he gave in return. The love Jessica thought was balanced began to feel increasingly like an emotional transaction. At first, Alex was everything she ever wanted. But as the months passed, the relationship started feeling one-sided. Jessica's devotion to Alex was clear to everyone around her. She had made him her priority. His problems were her problems, and his dreams were now intertwined with hers. She spent hours helping him with his coursework, lending him money when he was short, and providing the emotional support he needed during tough times. She genuinely believed that she was helping him build a future, just as they had both discussed when they first got together. But what Jessica didn't know was that Alex wasn't just relying on her. He was beginning to manipulate her into doing more than she ever should have. At first, his requests for help were innocent enough. But as time passed, they became more demanding. When he wanted her to take a day off studying to visit him, she did. When he asked her to pay for something he forgot to budget for, she didn't hesitate. He knew exactly how to play on her insecurities, making her feel as though if she didn't support him, he would fall apart. He made her feel guilty for even considering taking time for herself, much less for saying no to him. Over time, Jessica became emotionally dependent on Alex, thinking that his happiness and well-being were tied to her ability to support him. His emotional needs began to take precedence over her own, and slowly, Jessica started to lose sight of her own identity. She thought that as long as she was giving everything to Alex, she was doing the right thing. But the more she gave, the more Alex took. He made her feel like she was the only one who could fix his life, and in doing so, he created a toxic cycle of emotional dependence. Jessica's own dreams and goals began to fade into the background. Where once she was the bright, ambitious woman who had a clear plan for her future, now she was living for someone else. She convinced herself that this was how love worked, that she needed to make sacrifices for Alex to succeed. Her love for him blinded her to the growing flaws in their relationship. The more he relied on her, the less she questioned it, believing that if she loved him enough, everything would eventually work out. Despite the growing sense of imbalance in the relationship, Jessica tried to stay optimistic. There were moments when she would feel a sense of unease, but she dismissed them, telling herself that everything was fine. Maybe things were just difficult right now because Alex was under pressure. Maybe he just needed a little more time. Maybe if she just gave him a little more support, everything would be okay. She convinced herself that Alex still cared for her deeply. After all, he had been so affectionate in the beginning. He would say things like, "You're the one person who truly understands me," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." These words reassured Jessica, even though deep down, she could feel the cracks in their relationship widening. Her gut told her something was wrong, but her heart wouldn't allow her to accept it. One day, while studying for an exam, Jessica noticed that Alex hadn't responded to her texts all day. This wasn't unusual at first, but as the hours passed, she began to worry. Was he ignoring her? Was he upset with her? She felt a knot in her stomach as she tried to focus on her studies. But her thoughts kept drifting to Alex. What was he doing? Why wasn't he answering? By the time she saw him later that evening, he acted as though nothing was wrong. He smiled at her and greeted her like everything was fine. But Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had heard rumors about Alex spending time with other girls, but she dismissed them, thinking they were just rumors. Now, as she stood in front of him, she couldn't help but wonder if the rumors were true. Yet, in that moment, Jessica chose to ignore her feelings. She told herself that things would work out, that Alex was just going through a tough time. She pushed her concerns aside, believing that love was enough to fix everything. She refused to believe that the man she had sacrificed so much for would betray her. Despite the rising tension and her growing discomfort, Jessica remained hopeful that their relationship would eventually stabilize. She couldn't imagine her life without Alex. He had become her world. But little did she know, the emotional foundation she had worked so hard to build was crumbling beneath her, and the betrayal that was coming would shake her to the core. The breaking point came when Jessica began to suspect something deeper was going on, something far worse than her growing doubts. She had started to hear whispers from friends, casual comments about Alex's interactions with other women. At first, she brushed it off, thinking it was just gossip. But the comments grew more frequent, and her suspicions started to grow. One day, while Alex was out, Jessica found herself scrolling through her social media feed. She stumbled across a post from a mutual friend, an image of Alex and another woman at a party. The woman's face wasn't familiar to Jessica, and that alone set off alarm bells in her mind. She had never seen this woman before, but there Alex was standing far too close, with his arm around her waist. The caption was innocuous enough, just a simple good time with good friends. But to Jessica, it felt like a slap in the face. Her heart raced as she tried to convince herself that she was overreacting. But deep down, she knew that Alex was hiding something. She confronted him later that evening, but he denied everything. "You're just being paranoid," he told her. But despite his words, the seed of doubt had been planted, and Jessica couldn't shake it. She couldn't let it go. The next day, Jessica decided she had to find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Her instincts told her that Alex was hiding something more than just a fleeting flirtation. She decided to take matters into her own hands. The pivotal moment came when Jessica arrived unannounced at Alex's apartment, determined to get to the bottom of her suspicions. She had called him several times throughout the day, but his responses had been curt and dismissive. Something was off, and she was determined to find out what it was. As she arrived at his building, her heart raced in anticipation. The elevator ride to his floor felt like an eternity. When she finally knocked on his door, there was no answer. For a moment, she hesitated, wondering if she had made a mistake. But then, she heard laughter from inside. It was unmistakable. Alex's voice, accompanied by another voice that was all too familiar. The door creaked open, and there they were, Alex sitting on his bed, with none other than Tina, her best friend, lying next to him. They were both naked. The world seemed to spin around Jessica as she stood frozen in the doorway, her mind unable to comprehend what she was seeing. Alex's eyes widened in shock when he saw Jessica standing there, but Tina didn't even flinch. She simply smiled, a smile that was both knowing and triumphant. Jessica's heart shattered as the truth hit her like a ton of bricks. The one person she had trusted, her closest friend, had been involved in a betrayal she couldn't have imagined. Tina had been the one to feed Alex's ego, the one who had helped him destroy Jessica from the inside out. What happened next shook Jessica to her core. She walked in on the one person she trusted the most, lying naked in bed with her best friend. The room seemed to close in on Jessica as her world collapsed. Every sacrifice she had made, every moment she had spent trying to make Alex's life better, every ounce of love she had poured into their relationship, none of it mattered. She had been used, manipulated, and betrayed by the two people she had trusted the most. In that moment, all of Jessica's carefully constructed walls came crashing down. She wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice of it all, but instead, she was paralyzed by disbelief and heartbreak. The questions flooded her mind. How could this have happened? Why did Alex let get this far? Why had Tina, her best friend, done this to her? As tears streamed down her face, Alex looked at her, coldly saying, "I broke up with you a long time ago. I just didn't have the courage to tell you." He didn't apologize. There were no excuses, just cold indifference. Jessica stumbled backward, feeling like the ground beneath her had been ripped away. Her entire world, the one she had worked so hard to build, had been destroyed in an instant. She left the apartment without saying another word, her heart heavy with the realization that everything she had known had been a lie. The betrayal was not just from Alex. It was from Tina, the one person who had been closest to her. The pain of losing two people she loved and trusted was unbearable, and she couldn't fathom how she could ever recover from it. The first few days after the betrayal were a blur for Jessica. She was emotionally numb, unable to comprehend the reality of what had just happened. Everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, suddenly felt meaningless. The life she had built with Alex was a lie, and the weight of that truth crushed her. Jessica found herself in a dark place, questioning everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and friendship. She had spent years building a future around someone who had only seen her as a means to an end. Her once vibrant, determined self was now replaced by a woman struggling to make sense of the chaos that had shattered her life. The emotional devastation wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the loss of the person she thought she knew. Alex, the charming man she had adored, had turned out to be a manipulative liar. And Tina, her best friend, had shown herself to be someone she could never trust again. How could Tina, the person who had shared all her secrets and comforted her in times of need, have been part of this? How could she betray Jessica in such a deep, personal way? Flashbacks began to surface in Jessica's mind. She recalled the times when Alex had asked for money, the countless hours spent comforting him, the way he had slowly made her believe that her worth was tied to his happiness. How had she missed the warning signs? How could she have been so blind? Jessica's thoughts spiraled as she relived the moments when she had ignored the red flags, Alex's evasiveness about his family, the way he kept her at arm's length when it came to his past, and the emotional manipulation disguised as love. How had she allowed herself to become so entrenched in a relationship that, in hindsight, was never healthy? As the days went on, Jessica tried to piece together how everything had gone so terribly wrong. She confronted herself with the uncomfortable truth. She had been manipulated, used, and controlled by someone she had trusted completely. And the person who had been complicit in that manipulation was her closest friend. It was time for Jessica to confront the reality of who Alex truly was, as she would lean on her, making her feel responsible for his happiness. And when he no longer needed her, he discarded her, moving on without any hesitation. But it wasn't just about Alex. The betrayal went deeper. Tina, Jessica's best friend, had been complicit in the entire affair. As Jessica dug deeper into her thoughts, she realized how much of Tina's actions had been premeditated. Tina had always been a bit too close to Alex, too eager to share in their relationship. Jessica had ignored it, thinking it was harmless, but now everything made sense. Tina's jealousy of their relationship had fueled her own hidden desires, and she had used her position as Jessica's confidant to manipulate the situation. Tina had known about Jessica's struggles with infertility. She had listened to Jessica's pain and fears about not being able to have children, and in the depths of that vulnerability, she had seized the opportunity. Tina had fed Alex the information he needed to leave Jessica. She had made sure to undermine Jessica's confidence in herself, making Alex believe she was not wife material because of her inability to have children. And when the time was right, Tina made her move. The fact that she had been in Alex's bed, naked and vulnerable, was the ultimate betrayal. As Jessica came to understand the full extent of the manipulation, her anger and disbelief grew. The person she had trusted most in the world had betrayed her. And for what? For a man who had never truly loved her? For a man who saw her as nothing more than a tool for his own benefit? The emotional aftermath of the betrayal was not only about the loss of Alex and Tina, it was about the loss of trust itself. Jessica had trusted them both implicitly, and now she didn't know who she could trust anymore. The betrayal left her questioning her ability to judge people and wondering if she had ever truly known what love and friendship were. How could she have been so blind? As she processed the emotional impact of what had happened, Jessica found herself in an internal battle. She had the power to confront Alex and Tina, to demand answers, to seek justice for the years she had spent supporting Alex and for the cruel way he had discarded her. But part of her wanted nothing more than to walk away, to close that chapter of her life and never look back. But could she walk away completely? Could she let go of the person who had once meant everything to her? The man she had invested years of her life into? The man she had loved with every ounce of her being? And what about Tina? Could she ever forgive her best friend for what she had done? The betrayal was too deep to comprehend, and Jessica couldn't imagine facing her friend again. Tina had played a role in not only destroying Jessica's relationship, but also in questioning her worth as a woman. Jessica felt a sense of loss so profound that she wasn't sure how to pick up the pieces of her life. In the midst of her pain, Jessica had to make a choice. Should she confront Alex and Tina, demand the truth, and try to regain control over her life? Or should she walk away completely, severing all ties and starting anew? The struggle was real, and Jessica knew that whatever decision she made would impact the rest of her life. It was the hardest decision she had ever faced, and with each passing day, the weight of her choices grew heavier. What would you have done if you were in Jessica's shoes? How would you react to betrayal from the person you trusted the most? Let us know in the comments below. Your thoughts and experiences could help others who are going through something similar. If you felt connected to Jessica's story, be sure to hit that like button and share this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more gripping, emotional stories like this one. We'll keep bringing you true crime narratives that dive deep into human emotions and unexpected twists.